Leadership Story Talks, where we discuss the practices that engage, motivate, develop, retain, and attract people to businesses. We'll give you principles and tools based on real-world stories to leverage listening and storytelling to become a better leader and management professional. Leadership Story Talks is produced by Narrative, a company that focuses on personal storytelling for business.
You know, we talk about jargon all the time, and research shows us that people who use jargon are considered to be less trustworthy. And I would also add to that, when they use the jargon to someone who may know what it means, but they don't use it all the time, their listening actually decreases because they have to process it. And so it's funny because when we're young in our career, we use jargon for credibility because we want to show that we're a part of the club. But being part of a club means that there are outsiders to that club.
All right. Hello, everyone. That was Nadine Keller. Really wonderful interview. It was hard to focus on just one excerpt because there were so many nuggets in that interview. So the first thing I want to do is invite everybody to go back to the original episode as well and hear the full interview because it's really it was very moving, I thought. And so anyway, but we did choose one that you've just heard now, and yeah, this idea of jargon and how we use jargon and how it kind of excludes a lot of people when we do that, even when we think we're including people. So I thought that was a very powerful thing to let us know about, that it's actually scientifically proven that you will be deemed less trustworthy the more you use jargon, and that for even those that understand the jargon, it will be less easy for them to listen to you as you use jargon. So what are your thoughts and reflections on that?
Nadine, wherever you are, where were you in the 90s when I was sitting in meetings and I would sit next to other professionals who would just rattle off the buzzwords and the phrases, and I'm like, that's way too complicated. I can't even remember all those terms. And want to just have a conversation with somebody. This would have been a game-changing moment for me because I used to think that's what I was supposed to aspire to, memorizing the buzzwords, and maybe that would work, but it doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah.
So it was very life confirming the other, or affirming, basically, I should say, the other day. And it's true. It's alienating. I think what happens too, like many of us, we forget what some of those terms are, and we spend more time trying to remember and decipher than listen. Listen. And what we're usually trying to say isn't that complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think once again we've seen this many times in our work that, you know, and you're right. I mean, I've been guilty of this too, especially early on in my career. I resonated with the fact that it's, people do this for credibility. And I certainly did that. I certainly, tried to learn all the corporate lingo and the jargon or the acronyms, et cetera, so that I could kind of be at the be seen as being on the same level as everybody else. But now looking back on it, yeah, maybe I felt I was more credible, but didn't do anything to help anybody listen. And I think we've seen that a lot in our work too, that people come in, and as we're teaching them to tell a story, within the story, there are these acronyms and jargon that they think everyone will understand. Or actually, they're not really thinking about it because it's just second nature to use that. And so you kind of have to untrain yourself and unlearn all that corporate speak, especially if you want to tell a story to connect with someone else. That's really important.
Decades ago, I always talked to Jerome about how I reversed engineered my work in storytelling because I was doing a lot of recruiting. That was where I had focused a lot of my time. And because of that, I had to go and meet with hiring managers and executives and get a sense of their world and what they're doing. And there was this particular building on the lower part of Manhattan on the west side, very well-known company. And I would go to meetings and I thinking like I would bring the directory of terminology with me because I kept thinking, I need subtitles for this conversation. I'm trying to take notes and I have no idea what they just said. They were operating in a noun and verb free environment and just buzzwords. And I was like questioning it and it just didn't help. So
Hmm.
I do remember sitting there and going, in simple terms, what happens that you make an impact on and who do you need to help you accomplish these things? And but we do love our buzzwords. We're very good at that. And
Yeah,
we're
and
all, we can lapse into that language. So somebody has to check us at the door once in a while and tell us to drop the buzzwords and leave it behind and just speak in simple conversational terms.
yeah. Yeah, and I can understand why that exists, because there are certain fields in particular where we're involved with nonprofit organizations, foundations, et cetera, where, especially organizations that are dealing with systemic issues, like poverty and violence, et cetera, and trying to move that needle, you need to sort of create definitions and shorthands so that everybody's kind of on the same page. That's the good intention behind it.
Yes.
But the impact of it, or the negative impact of it, is that it's actually dehumanizing. And so, a very specific example that we worked on recently, when the State Department asked us to create a program that would help to destigmatize gender-based violence, and essentially, well, not destigmatize it, but help people be better at talking about their experiences around gender-based violence and finding the support that they need. The acronym is GBV. And it was interesting whenever we spoke to people, our whole program was about storytelling, obviously, and getting people to tell stories about what's going on the ground. And that term kept coming back. And the result of it was that the actual impact of gender-based violence on somebody's life was not as powerful as when they told a story describing what happened to them. And what we discovered is that the more stories we heard, the more this term gender-based violence became layered. And it wasn't just about physical violence, it was about psychological violence, it was about the emotional impact of it. Whereas a lot of times people were using this shorthand and you didn't actually get to understand what their experience was. And so the idea is that the more you can have this rich tapestry of experience, the less that acronym is powerful, and then it becomes the thing that it was meant to be, which is an acronym that everybody can understand. But then there's these stories underneath it that tell you what it really means. And this is true. I'm using an extreme example of something that's happening in the world, but that's life and death. But if you think of the corporate world, and all these little acronyms that we use, even DEI, something like that, it leaves so much to interpretation. And as a result, people agree with it or disagree with it. We should have DEI, we shouldn't have DEI, it's this, it's that. But when you tell stories of experiences that reflect what you mean by that acronym, that's when people start to understand what you're actually talking about. And that's become a lot of our work, is to kind of take these, even when you talk about values, this is what we stand for. We stand for trust, integrity. Okay, well, I have a definition of integrity. You have a definition of integrity. Everybody has a definition. It's all different. So what are the stories that are going to make it comprehensible to everyone in the company to say, yes, that's what we mean by integrity. That's our story of integrity. Unless you have that, it's going to go right over people's heads, and it's not really going to have any impact.
Well, I so agree with that because I mentioned being in recruiting for years and with lots of positive intent, sometimes it turned into a check a box
Mm.
initiative versus digging a little deeper about why we weren't achieving goals and why we weren't having conversations the way we should have been having conversations or taking actions. So when you're telling a story, you're humanizing. the situation and you're bringing someone to life and you're making it real. I can tell you a lot of things I knew I was supposed to be empathetic about. And what the difference was when I talked to the person and had a real conversation and they gave me examples of how um, they had to navigate their life, simple things that I took for granted, ability to get access to bathrooms, etc. Like how many things happen. I could picture that whole conversation like it's happening right now. So stories help us translate the experience into something real that's relatable and memorable. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, of course. And so, yeah, so that would be my invitation to the audience is, look at these things that you take for granted, essentially, like you just said, and what are the stories behind it? What are the stories that can really illuminate these acronyms and this corporate speak that we use a lot? And let's try to check ourselves a little bit more and bring our curiosity to kind of bring up these stories. And I'll say what I always say is that if this is inspiring you to learn more about listening, about storytelling, about how you can bring to life your values and what you stand for, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We're at narrative.com. That's NARATIV.com. That's where you can find this episode. And also, I really highly recommend that you go back to the episode that this is based on with Nadine Keller, because there's a lot of these examples that you just talked about, Julienne.
Oh yeah.
She gave us some great stories as well. So you can see how that's even applicable to the sales process. So any questions at all, we're always ready to listen and happy to listen.
I'll leave you with one thing. We can't make change with a PowerPoint. So conversations and listening in real time, spend time, and you will earn time in bigger ways going forward if you invest the time to come together and listen and talk in very structured and supportive environments.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. Thanks, Julienne, for those wise words. And thanks for being my co-host as well. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.